wanted to sleep, they would not let me even doze a little for their outcry, and so I lay sleepless with a headache until cock-crow. No, gods, let us refrain from helping these hosts, or one of us may get wounded with a sharp spear, for they fight hand to hand, even if a god comes against them. Let us rather all amuse ourselves watching the fight from heaven. LL 197 to 198, so said Athena. And the other gods agreed with her, and all went in a body to one place. LL 199 to 201, then gnats with great trumpets sounded the fell note of war, and Zeus the son of Cronos thundered from heaven, a sign of grievous battle. LL 202 to 223, first loud croaker wounded Lickman in the belly, right through the midriff. Down fell he on his face and soiled his soft fur in the dust, he fell with a thud and his armor clashed about him. Next Troglodyte shot at the son of Mudman, and drove the strong spear deep into his breast, so he fell, and Black Death seized him and his spirit flitted forth from his mouth. Then Beatty struck Pot Visitor to the heart and killed him, and Bread Nibbler hit Loud Crier in the belly, so that he fell on his face and his spirit flitted forth from his limbs. Now when Pond Larker saw Loud Crier perishing, he struck in quickly and wounded Troglodyte in his soft neck with a rock like a millstone, so that darkness veiled his eyes. Thereatochimides was seized with grief, and struck out with his sharp reed and did not draw his spear back to him again, but felled his enemy there and then. And Lickman shot at him with a bright spear and hit him unerringly in the midriff. And as he marked Cabbage Eater running away, he fell on the steep bank, yet even so did not cease fighting but smote that other so that he fell and did not rise again. And the lake was dyed with red blood as he lay outstretched along the shore, pierced through the guts and shining flanks. Also he slew Cheese Eater on the very brink. Lacuna, LL 224 to 251, but Reedy took to flight when he saw Ham Nibbler, and fled, plunging into the lake and throwing away his shield. Then blameless Pot Visitor killed Brewer and Waterlarked killed the Lord Ham Nibbler, striking him on the head with a pebble, so that his brains flowed out at his nostrils and the earth was bespattered with blood. Faultless Muckcoucher sprang upon Lick Platter and killed him with his spear and brought darkness upon his eyes, and Leaky saw it, and dragged Lick Platter by the foot, though he was dead, and choked him in the lake. But Crumb Snatcher was fighting to avenge his dead comrades, and hit Leaky before he reached the land, and he fell forward at the blow and his soul went down to Hades. And seeing this, the Cabbage Climber took a clod of mud and hurled it at the mouse, plastering all his forehead and nearly blinding him. Thereat Crumb Snatcher was enraged and caught up in his strong hand a huge stone that lay upon the ground, a heavy burden for the soil, with that he hit Cabbage Climber below the knee and splintered his whole right shin, hurling him on his back in the dust. But Croak Person kept him off, and rushing at the mouse in turn, hit him in the middle of the belly and drove the whole reed spear into him, and as he drew the spear back to him with his strong hand, all his foe's bowels gushed out upon the ground. And when Troglodyte saw the deed, as he was limping away from the fight on the river bank, he shrank back sorely moved, and leaped into a trench to escape sheer death. Then Bread Nibbler hit Puffjaw on the toes. He came up at the last from the lake and was greatly distressed. Lacuna, LL 252 to 259, and when Leaky saw him fallen forward, but still half alive, he pressed through those who fought in front and hurled a sharp reed at him, but the point of the spear was stayed and did not break his shield. Then noble Rufal, like Ars himself, struck his flawless headpiece made of 4 pots. He only among the frogs showed prowess in the throng. But when he saw the other rush at him, he did not stay to meet the stout-hearted hero but dived down to the depths of the lake. LL 260 to 271. Now there was one among the mice, Slice Snatcher, who excelled the rest, dear son of Nora the son of blameless bread stealer. He went to his house and bade his son take part in the war. This warrior threatened to destroy the race of frogs utterly 3603, and splitting a chestnut husk into 2 parts along the joint, put the 2 hollow pieces as armor on his paws. Then straightway the frogs were dismayed and all rushed down to the lake, and he would have made good his boast, for he had great strength, had not the son of Cronos, the father of men and gods, been quick to mark the thing and pitied the frogs as they were perishing. He shook his head, and uttered this word, LL 272 to 276, Dear, dear, how fearful a deed do my eyes behold. Slice Snatcher makes no small panic rushing to and fro among the frogs by the lake. Let us then make all haste and send warlike Pallas or even us, for they will stop his fighting, strong though he is. LL 277 to 284, so said the son of Cronos, but Hera answered him, Son of Cronos, neither the might of Athena nor of ours can avail to deliver the frogs from utter destruction. Rather, come and let us all go to help them, or else let loose your weapon, the great and formidable Titan killer with which you killed Capaneus, that doughty man, and great Enceladus and the wild tribes of giants, let it loose, for so the most valiant will be slain. LL 285 to 293, so said Hera, and the son of Cronos cast a lurid thunderbolt. First he thundered and made great Olympus shake, and cast the thunderbolt, the awful weapon of Zeus, tossing it lightly forth. Thus he frightened them all, frogs and mice alike, hurling his bolt upon them. Yet even so the army of the mice did not relax, but hoped still more to destroy the brood of warrior frogs. Only, the son of Cronos, on Olympus, pitied the frogs and then straightway sent them helpers. LL 294 to 303, so there came suddenly warriors with mailed backs and curving claws, crooked beasts that walked sideways, nut-cracker-jawed, shell-hided, bony they were, flat-backed, with glistening shoulders and bandy legs and stretching arms and eyes that looked behind them. They had also 8 legs and 2 feelers, persistent creatures who are called crabs. These nipped off the tails and paws and feet of the mice with their jaws, while spears only beat on them. Of these the mice were all afraid and no longer stood up to them, but turned and fled. Already the sun was set, and so came the end of the one-day war. Of the origin of Homer and Hesiod, and of their contest everyone boasts that the most divine of poets, Homer and Hesiod, are said to be his particular countrymen. Hesiod, indeed, has put a name to his native place and so prevented any rivalry, for he said that his father settled near Helicon in a wretched hamlet, Ascra, which is miserable in winter, sultry in summer, and good at no season. But, as for Homer, you might almost say that every city with its inhabitants claims him as her son. Foremost are the men of Smyrna who say that he was the son of Meles, the river of their town, by a nymph Cretheus, and that he was at first called Melisagens. He was named Homer later, when he became blind, this being their usual epithet for such people. The Chians, on the other hand, bring forward evidence to show that he was their countryman, saying that there actually remains some of his descendants among them who are called Homeridae. The Colophonians even show the place where they declare that he began to compose when a schoolmaster, and say that his first work was the Margites. As to his parents also, there is on all hands great disagreement. Hellanicus and Cleanthes say his father was Maon, but Eugeion says Meles, Caulocles is Formnisa Grass, Democritus of Troezen for Demon, a merchant trader. Some, again, say he was the son of Tamiras, but the Egyptians say of Menomachus, a priest scribe, and there are even those who father him on Telemachus, the son of Odysseus. As for his mother, she is variously called Metis, Cretheus, Themista, and Eunitho. Others say she was an Ithacan woman sold as a slave by the Phoenicians, other, Calliope the Muse, others again Polycaster, the daughter of Nestor. Homer himself was called Meles or, according to different accounts, Melisagens or Alts. Some authorities say he was called Homer, because his father was given as a hostage to the Persians by the men of Cyprus, others, because of his blindness, for amongst the Aeolians the blind are so called. We will set down, however, what we have heard to have been said by the Pythia concerning Homer in the time of the most sacred Emperor Hadrian. When the monarch inquired from what city Homer came, and whose son he was, the priestess delivered a response in hexameters after this fashion: Do you ask me of the obscure race and country of the heavenly Siren? Ithaca is his country, Telemachus his father, and Epicasta, Nestor's daughter, the mother that bare him, a man by far the wisest of mortal kind. This we must most implicitly believe, the inquirer and the answerer being who they are, especially since the poet has so greatly glorified his grandfather in his works. Now some say that he was earlier than Hesiod, others that he was younger and akin to him. They give his descent thus: Apollo and Aetheusa, daughter of Poseidon, had a son Linus, to whom was born Pyrrhus. From Pyrrhus and the nymph Methon sprang Aeger, and from Aeger and Calliope Orpheus, from Orpheus, Dis, and from him, Eucles. The descent is continued through Eadmonides, Philoterpes, Euphemus, Epiphrodites and Melanopus, who had sons Dius and Apelles. Dius by Pisamid, The daughter of Apollo had two sons, Hesiod and Perses, while Apelspergomaion, who was the father of Homer by a daughter of the river Meles. According to one account, they flourished at the same time and even had a contest of skill at Chalcis in Euboea. For, they say, after Homer had composed the Margites, he went about from city to city as a minstrel, and coming to Delphi, inquired who he was and of what country. The Pythia answered, "The Isle of Ios is your mother's country, and it shall receive you dead, but beware of the riddle of the young children." 3701. Hearing this, it is said, he hesitated to go to Ios, and remained in the region where he was. Now about the same time Ganycta was celebrating the funeral rites of his father Amphidamas, king of Euboea, and invited to the gathering not only all those who were famous for bodily strength and fleetness of foot, but also those who excelled in wit, promising them great rewards. And so, as the story goes, the two went to Chalcis and met by chance. The leading Chalcidians were judges together with Paneades, the brother of the dead king, and it is said that after a wonderful contest between the two poets, Hesiod won in the following manner. He came forward into the midst and put Homer one question after another, which Homer answered. Hesiod, then, began, "Homer, son of Meles, inspired with wisdom from heaven, come, tell me first what is best for mortal man." Homer, "For men on earth 'tis best never to be born at all, or being born, to pass through the gates of Hades with all speed." Hesiod then asked again, "Come, tell me now this also, godlike Homer, what think you in your heart is most delightsome to men?" Homer answered, "When mirth reigns throughout the town, and feasters about the house, sitting in order, listen to a minstrel, when the tables beside them are laden with bread and meat, and a wine-bearer draws sweet drink from the mixing bowl and fills the cups. This I think in my heart to be most delightsome." It is said that when Homer had recited these verses, they were so admired by the Greeks as to be called golden by them, and that even now at public sacrifices all the guests solemnly recite them before feasts and libations. Hesiod, however, was annoyed by Homer's felicity and hurried on to pose him with hard questions. He therefore began with the following lines, "Come, Muse, sing not to me of things that are, or that shall be, or that were of old, but think of another song." Then Homer, wishing to escape from the impasse by an apt answer, replied, "Never shall horses with clattering hoofs break chariots, striving for victory about the tomb of Zeus." Here again Homer had fairly met Hesiod, and so the latter turned to sentences of doubtful meaning. 3702. He recited many lines and required Homer to complete the sense of each appropriately. The first of the following verses is Hesiod's and the next Homer's, but sometimes Hesiod puts his question in 2 lines. Hesiod, "Then they dined on the flesh of oxen and their horses' necks." Homer, "They unyoked dripping with sweat, when they had had enough of war." Hesiod, "And the Phrygians, who of all men are handiest at ships." Homer, "To filch their dinner from pirates on the beach." Hesiod, "To shoot forth arrows against the tribes of cursed giants with his hands." Homer, Heracles unslung his curved bow from his shoulders. Hesiod, this man is the son of a brave father and a weakling, Homer, mother, for war is too stern for any woman. Hesiod, but for you, your father and lady mother lay in love, Homer, when they begot you by the aid of golden Aphrodite. Hesiod, but when she had been made subject in love, Artemis, who delights in arrows, Homer, slew Callisto with a shot of her silver bow. Hesiod, so they feasted all day long, taking nothing, Homer, from their own houses, for Agamemnon, king of men, supplied them. Hesiod, when they had feasted, they gathered among the glowing ashes the bones of the dead Zeus, Homer, born Sarpedon, that bold and godlike man. Hesiod, now we have lingered thus about the plain of Simois, forth from the ships let us go our way, upon our shoulders, Homer, having our hilted swords and long-helved spears. Hesiod, then the young heroes with their hands from the sea, Homer, gladly and swiftly hauled out their fleet ship. Hesiod, then they came to Colchis and King Aeetes, Homer, they avoided, for they knew he was inhospitable and lawless. Hesiod, now when they had poured libations and deeply drunk the surging sea, Homer, they were minded to traverse on well-built ships. Hesiod, the son of Atreus prayed greatly for them that they all might perish, Homer, at no time in the sea, and he opened his mouth said Hesiod, eat, my guests, and drink, and may no one of you return home to his dear country, Homer, distressed, but may you all reach home again unscathed. When Homer had met him fairly on every point, Hesiod said, only tell me this thing that I ask, how many Achaeans went to Ilium with the sons of Atreus? Homer answered in a mathematical problem, thus, there were 50 hearths, and at each hearth were 50 spits, and on each spit were 50 carcasses, and there were thrice 300 Achaeans to each joint. This is found to be an incredible number, for as there were 50 hearths, the number of spits is 2,500, and of carcasses, 120,000. Homer, then, having the advantage on every point, Hesiod was jealous and began again, Homer, son of Mels, if indeed the Muses, daughters of great Zeus the Most High, honor you as it is said, tell me a standard that is both best and worst for mortal men, for I long to know it. Homer replied, Hesiod, son of Deus, I am willing to tell you what you command, and very readily will I answer you. For each man to be a standard will I answer you. For each man to be a standard to himself is most excellent for the good, but for the bad it is the worst of all things. And now ask me whatever else your heart desires. Hesiod, how would men best dwell in cities, and with what observances? Homer, by scorning to get unclean gain, and if the good were honored, but justice fell upon the unjust. Hesiod, what is the best thing of all for a man to ask of the gods in prayer? Homer, that he may be always at peace with himself continually. Hesiod, can you tell me in briefest space what is best of all? Homer, a sound mind in a manly body, as I believe. Hesiod, of what effect are righteousness and courage? Homer, to advance the common good by private pains. Hesiod, what is the mark of wisdom among men? Homer, to read aright the present, and to march with the occasion. Hesiod, in what kind of matter is it right to trust in men? Homer, where danger itself follows the action close. Hesiod, what do men mean by happiness? Homer, death after a life of least pain and greatest pleasure. After these verses had been spoken, all the Hellenes called for Homer to be crowned. But King Penedes bade each of them recite the finest passage from his own poems. Hesiod, therefore, began as follows: when the Pleiads, the daughters of Atlas, begin to rise, begin the harvest, and begin ploughing ere they set. For 40 nights and days they are hidden, but appear again as the year wears round, when first the sickle is sharpened. This is the law of the plains, and for those who dwell near the sea or live in the rich soiled valleys, far from the wave-tossed deep, strip to sow, and strip to plough, and strip to reap when all things are in season. 3703 Then Homer, the ranks stood firm about the two Oronts, such that not even Ars would have scorned them had he met them, nor yet Athena who saves armies. For there the chosen best awaited the charge of the Trojans, and noble Hector, making a fence of spears and serried shields. Shield closed with shield, and helm with helm, and each man with his fellow, and the peaks of their head-pieces with crests of horsehair touched as they bent their heads, so close they stood together. The murderous battle bristled with the long, flesh-rending spears they held, and the flash of bronze from polished helms and new-burnished breastplates and gleaming shields blinded the eyes. Very hard of heart would he have been, who could then have seen that strife with joy and felt no pang. 3704 Here, again, the Hellenes applauded Homer admiringly, so far did the verses exceed the ordinary level, and demanded that he should be adjudged the winner. But the king gave the crown to Hesiod, declaring that it was right that he who called upon men to follow peace and husbandry should have the prize rather than one who dwelt on war and slaughter. In this way, then, we are told, Hesiod gained the victory and received a brazen tripod which he dedicated to the Muses with this inscription: Hesiod dedicated this tripod to the Muses of Helicon after he had conquered divine Homer at Chalcis in a contest of song. After the gathering was dispersed, Hesiod crossed to the mainland and went to Delphi to consult the oracle and to dedicate the first fruits of his victory to the god. They say that as he was approaching the temple, the prophetess became inspired and said, "Blessed is this man who serves my house, Hesiod, who is honored by the deathless Muses. Surely his renown shall be as wide as the light of dawn is spread. But beware of the pleasant grove of Nemean-Zeus, for their death's end is destined to befall you." When Hesiod heard this oracle, he kept away from the Peloponnesus, supposing that the god meant the Nemi there, and coming to Ino in Lacris, he stayed with Amphiphons and Gonieta the sons of Phegeus, thus unconsciously fulfilling the oracle, for all that region was called the sacred place of Nemean-Zeus. He continued to stay a somewhat long time at Ino, until the young men, suspecting Hesiod of seducing their sister, killed him and cast his body into the sea which separates Achaea and Lacris. On the third day, however, his body was brought to land by dolphins while some local feast of Ariadne was being held. Thereupon, all the people hurried to the shore, and recognized the body, lamented over it and buried it, and then began to look for the assassins. But these, fearing the anger of their countrymen, launched a fishing boat, and put out to sea for Crete. They had finished half their voyage when Zeus sank them with a thunderbolt, as Alcidamas states in his museum. Eratosthenes, however, says in his Hesiod that Ctemenus and Antiphus, sons of Gonieta, killed him for the reason already stated, and were sacrificed by Eurycles the seer to the gods of hospitality. He adds that the girl, sister of the above-named, hanged herself after she had been seduced, and that she was seduced by some stranger, Demotes by name, who was traveling with Hesiod, and who was also killed by the brothers. At a later time the men of Orchomenus removed his body as they were directed by an oracle, and buried him in their own country, where they placed this inscription on his tomb: Ascra with its many cornfields was his native land, but in death the land of the horse-driving Minyons holds the bones of Hesiod, whose renown is greatest among men of all who are judged by the test of wit. So much for Hesiod. But Homer, after losing the victory, went from place to place reciting his poems, and first of all the Thebaean 7,000 verses, which begins, Goddess, sing of parched Argus whence kings, and then the Epigony in 7,000 verses beginning, and now, Muses, let us begin to sing of men of later days, for some say that these poems also are by Homer. Now Xanthus and Gorgas, son of Midas the king, heard his epics and invited him to compose an epitaph for the tomb of their father, on which was a bronze figure of a maiden bewailing the death of Midas. He wrote the following lines: I am a maiden of bronze and sit upon the tomb of Midas. While water flows, and tall trees put forth leaves, and rivers swell, and the sea breaks on the shore, while the sun rises and shines and the bright moon also, ever remaining on this mournful tomb, I tell the passer-by that Midas here lies buried. For these verses they gave him a silver bowl which he dedicated to Apollo at Delphi with this inscription: Lord Phoebus, I, Homer, have given you a noble gift for the wisdom I have of you. Do you ever grant me renown? After this he composed the Odyssey in 12,000 verses, having previously written the Iliad in 15,500 verses 3,705. From Delphi, as we are told, he went to Athens and was entertained by Medon, king of the Athenians. And being one day in the council hall when it was cold and a fire was burning there, he drew off the following lines: Children are a man's crown, and towers of a city, horses are the ornament of a plain, and ships of the sea, and good it is to see a people seated in assembly. But with a blazing fire a house looks worthier upon a wintry day when the son of Cronos sends down snow. From Athens he went on to Corinth, where he sang snatches of his poems and was received with distinction. Next he went to Argos and there recited these verses from the Iliad: The sons of the Achaeans who held Argos and walled Tiryns, and Hermione and Asine which lie along a deep bay, and Trozen, and Iones, and vine-clad Epidaurus, and the island of Aegina, and Marses. These followed strong-voiced Diomedes, son of Tydeus, who had the spirit of his father the son of Enus, and Sthenelus, dear son of famous Capaneus. And with these two there went a third leader, Eurypylus, a godlike man, son of the lord Mecistus, sprung of Talos, but strong-voiced Diomedes was their chief leader. These men had 80 dark ships wherein were ranged men skilled in war, Argives with linen jerkins, very gods of war. 3706. This praise of their race by the most famous of all poets so exceedingly delighted the leading Argives, that they rewarded him with costly gifts and set up a brazen statue to him, decreeing that sacrifice should be offered to Homer daily, monthly, and yearly, and that another sacrifice should be sent to Chios every 5 years. This is the inscription they cut upon his statue. This is divine Homer, who by his sweet-voiced art honored all proud Hellas, but especially the Argives, who threw down the god-built walls of Troy to avenge rich-haired Helen. For this cause the people of a great city set his statue here and serve him with the honors of the deathless gods. After he had stayed for some time in Argos, he crossed over to Delos, to the great assembly, and there, standing on the altar of horns, he recited the hymn to Apollo 3707, which begins, I will remember and not forget Apollo the far shooter. When the hymn was ended, the Ionians made him a citizen of each one of their states, and the Delians wrote the poem on a whitened tablet and dedicated it in the temple of Artemis. The poet sailed to Ios, after the assembly was broken up, to join Creophilus, and stayed there some time, being now an old man. And, it is said, as he was sitting by the sea he asked some boys who were returning from fishing, Sirs, hunters of deep-sea prey, have we caught anything? To this replied, all that we caught, we left behind, and carry away all that we did not catch. Homer did not understand this reply and asked what they meant. They then explained that they had caught nothing in fishing, but had been catching their lice, and those of the lice which they caught, they left behind, but carried away in their clothes those which they did not catch. Hereupon Homer remembered the oracle and, perceiving that the end of his life had come, composed his own epitaph. And while he was retiring from that place, he slipped in a clayey place and fell upon his side, and died, it is said, the 3rd day after. He was buried in Ios, and this is his epitaph. Here the earth covers the sacred head of divine Homer, the glorifier of hero men. Endnotes 1101. Return, SC in Gytia, Lacris and Thessaly. Elsewhere the movement was forced and unfruitful. 1102. Return. The extant collection of 3 poems, Works and Days, Theogony, and Shield of Heracles, which alone have come down to us complete, dates at least from the 4th century AD. The title of the Paris Papyrus, Bible. Nat. Serpil. Gr 1099, names only these 3 works. 1103. Return. Der Dialekt des Hesiods. p. 464. Examples are Enemi, W and D 683, and a Romanei, Ib 22. 1104. Return. T.W. Allen suggests that the conjured Delian and Pythian hymns to Apollo, Homeric hymns 3, may have suggested this version of the story, the Pythian hymn showing strong continental influence. 1105, return. She is said to have given birth to the lyrist Stesichorus. 1106, return. See Kinkle epic. Greek. Frag. I 158 ff. 1107, return. See Great Works, Frag. 2. 1108, return. Hesiod Fragmenta, pp 119 f. 1109, return. Possibly the division of this poem into two books is a division belonging solely to this developed poem, which may have included in its second part a summary of the tale of Troy. 1110, return. Goatling's explanation. 1111, return. X1. 52. 1112, return. Odysseus appears to have been mentioned once only, and that casually, in the returns. 1113, return. Quasit note that the Ethiopis and the Sac were originally merely parts of one work containing lays, the Amazonia, Ethiopis, Persis, etc., just as the Iliad contained various lays such as the Diomedeia. 1114, return. No date is assigned to him, but it seems likely that he was either contemporary or slightly earlier than Liszt's. 1115, return. C. P. Allen and Sykes, Homeric Hymns p. 15. In the text I have followed the arrangement of these scholars, numbering the hymns to Dionysius and to Demeter, I and II respectively, to place Demeter after Hermes, and the hymn to Dionysius at the end of the collection seems to be merely perverse. 1116, return. Greek Melic Poets, p. 165. 1117, return. This monument was returned to Greece in the 1980s. dbk. 1118, return. C. P. Mark Scheffel, Hesiod Fragmenta, p. 35. The papyrus fragment recovered by Petri Papyri, ed. Mahaffy, p. 70, no XXV, agrees essentially with the extant document, but differs in numerous minor textual points. 1201, return. C. Schubert, Bull. Classica text v 1.22 ff. The other papyri may be found in the publications whose name they bear. 1202, return, unless otherwise noted, all MSS are of the 15th century. 1203, return. To this list I would also add the following: Hesiod and Theonis, translated by Dorothea Wender, Penguin Classics, London, 1973. dbk. 1301, return, that is, the poor man's fare, like bread and cheese. 1302, return, the all-endowed. 1303, return, the jar or casket contained the gifts of the gods mentioned in L.82. 1304, return, Eustathius refers to Hesiod as stating that men sprung from oaks and stones and ash trees. Proclus believed that the nymphs called Malii, Theogony, 187, are intended. Goatling would render a race terrible because of their ashen spears. 1305, return, preserved only by Proclus, from whom some inferior MSS have copied the verse. The four following lines occur only in Geneva Papyri number 94. For the restoration of LL 169 BCC class. Quart 7. 219 to 220. Note, Mr. Evelyn White means that the version quoted by Proclus stops at this point, then picks up at L170. dbk. 1306, return, i.e. the race will so degenerate that at the last even a newborn child will show the marks of old age. 1307, return, eidos, as a quality, is that feeling of reverence or shame which restrains men from wrong. Nemesis is the feeling of righteous indignation aroused especially by the sight of the wicked in undeserved prosperity. Compare Psalms, LXY 1-19. 1308, return, the alternative version is, and, working, you will be much better loved both by gods and men, for they greatly dislike the idol. 1309, return, i.e. neighbors come at once and without making preparations, but kinsmen by marriage, who live at a distance, have to prepare, and so are long in coming. 1310, return, early in May. 1311, return, in November. 1312, return, in October. 1313, return, for pounding corn. 1314, return, a mallet for breaking clods after ploughing. 1315, return, the loaf is a flattish cake with two intersecting lines scored on its upper surface which divide it into 4 equal parts. 1316, return, the meaning is obscure. A scholiast renders giving 8 mouthfuls, but the elder Philostratus uses the word in contrast to leaven. 1317, return, about the middle of November. 1318, return, spring is so described because the buds have not yet cast their iron-grey husks. 1319, return, in December. 1320, return, in March. 1321, return, the latter part of January and earlier part of February. 1322, return, i.e. the octopus or cuttle. 1323, return, i.e. the darker-skinned people of Africa, the Egyptians or Ethiopians. 1324, return, i.e. an old man walking with a staff, the third leg, as in the riddle of the Sphinx. 1325, return, February to March. 1326, return, i.e. the snail. The season is the middle of May. 1327, return, in June. 1328, return, July. 1329, return, i.e. a robber. 1330, return, September. 1331, return, the end of October. 1332, return, that is, the succession of stars which make up the full year. 1333, return, the end of October or beginning of November. 1334, return, July-August. 1335, return, i.e. untimely, premature. Juvenal similarly speaks of cruda senectus, caused by gluttony. 1336, return, the thought is parallel to that of "Oh, what a goodly outside forsooth." 1337, return, the common feast is one to which all present subscribe. Theonis, line 495, says that one of the chief pleasures of a banquet is the general conversation. Hence the present passage means that such a feast naturally costs little, while the many present will make pleasurable conversation. 1338, return, i.e. do not cut your fingernails. 1339, return, i.e. things which it would be sacrilege to disturb, such as tombs. 1340, return, H.G. Evelyn White prefers to switch LL 768 and 769, reading L 769 first then L 768. DBK, 1341, return, the month is divided into 3 periods, the waxing, the mid-month, and the waning, which answer to the phases of the moon. 1342, return, i.e. the and. 1343, return, such seems to be the meaning here, though the epithet is otherwise rendered well-rounded. Corn was threshed by means of a sleigh with 2 runners having 3 or 4 rollers between them, like the modern Egyptian nurag. 1401, return, this halt verse is added by the scholiast on Aratus, 172. 1402, return, the Katastrismi, placings among the stars, is a collection of legends relating to the various constellations. 1403, return, the Straits of Messina. 1501, return, or perhaps a Scythian. 1601. Return. The epithet probably indicates coquettishness. 1602. Return. A proverbial saying meaning, why enlarge on irrelevant topics. 1603. Return. She of the noble voice, Calliope is queen of epic poetry. 1604. Return. Earth, in the cosmology of Hesiod, is a disk surrounded by the river Oceanus and floating upon a waste of waters. It is called the foundation of all. The qualification the deathless ones, etc. is an interpolation, because not only trees, men, and animals, but even the hills and seas, LL 129, 131, are supported by it. 1605. Return. Ether is the bright, untainted upper atmosphere, as distinguished from air, the lower atmosphere of the earth. 1606. Return. Brontes is the thunderer, Strapes, the lightener, and Arges, the vivid one. 1607. Return. The myth accounts for the separation of heaven and earth. In Egyptian cosmology, Nut, the sky, is thrust and held apart from her brother Jub, the earth, by their father Shu, who corresponds to the Greek Atlas. 1608. Return. Nymphs of the ash trees, as dryads are nymphs of the oak trees. CP Note on Works and Days, L145. 1609. Return. Member-loving. The title is perhaps only a perversion of the regular Philomades, laughter-loving. 1610. Return. Cletho, the spinner, is she who spins the thread of man's life. Lachesis, the disposer of lots, assigns to each man his destiny. Atropo, she who cannot be turned, is the fury with the abhorred shears. 1611. Return. Many of the names which follow express various qualities or aspects of the sea. Thus Gallon is calm, Comet is the wave swift, Phaerusa and Dynamen are she who speeds ships, and she who has power. 1612. Return. The wave receiver and the wave stiller. 1613. Return. The unerring or truthful, CPL 235. 1614. Return, i.e. Poseidon. 1615. Return. Goatling notes that some of these nymphs derive their names from lands over which they preside, as Europa, Asia, Doris, Ionera, Lady of the Ionians, but that most are called after some quality which their streams possessed. Thus Xanth is the brown or turbid, Amphiho is the surrounding river, Eunth is she who delights, and Osir is the swift-flowing. 1616. Return, Aeos, the early-born. 1617. Return. Van Lennep explains that Hecate, having no brothers to support her claim, might have been slighted. 1618. Return. The goddess of the hearth, the Roman Vesta, and so of the house. CP Homeric hymns v.22ff.x6.1ff. 1619, return. The variant reading of his father, SC. Heaven, rests on inferior MS authority and is probably an alteration due to the difficulty stated by a scholiast. How could Zeus, being not yet begotten, plot against his father? The phrase is, however, part of the prophecy. The whole line may well be spurious, and is rejected by Heine, Wolff, Gaisford and Guyot. 1620, return. Pausanias, x 24.6, saw near the tomb of Neoptolemus a stone of no great size, which the Delphians anointed every day with oil, and which he says was supposed to be the stone given to Cronos. 1621, return. A scholiast explains, either because they, men, sprang from the Malayan nymphs, CPL 187, or because, when they were born, they cast themselves under the ash trees, that is, the trees. The reference may be to the origin of men from ash trees, cp. Works and Days, L 145 and note. 1622, return, SC. Atlas, the Shoe of Egyptian Mythology, cp. Note on line 177. 1623, return. Oceanus is here regarded as a continuous stream enclosing the earth and the seas, and so as flowing back upon himself. 1624, return. The conception of Oceanus is here different. He has 9 streams which encircle the earth and then flow out into the main, which appears to be the waste of waters on which, according to early Greek and Hebrew cosmology, the disk-like earth floated. 1625, return, i.e. the threshold is of native metal, and not artificial. 1626, return. According to Homer, Typhus was overwhelmed by Zeus amongst the Arimi in Cilicia. Pindar represents him as buried under Etna, and Tzetzes reads Etna in this passage. 1627, return. The epithet, which means literally well-bored, seems to refer to the spout of the crucible. 1628, return. The fire god. There is no reference to volcanic action. Iron was smelted on Mount Ida, cp. Epigrams of Homer, 9. 2-4. 1629, return, i.e. Athena, who was born on the banks of the river Trito, CPL 929L, 1630, return, restored by Pep Muller. The 19 following lines from another recension of lines 889 to 900, 924 to 9 are quoted by Chrysippus, in Galen. 1631, return, SC the Aegis. Line 929S is probably spurious, since it disagrees with L929Q and contains a suspicious reference to Athens. 1701, return, a catalogue of heroines each of whom was introduced with the words eoie, or like her. 1702, return, an antiquarian writer of Byzantium, c. 490 to 570 AD. 1703, return, Constantine 7. Born in the Porphyry Chamber, 905 to 959 AD. 1704, return, Berlin Papyri, 7497, left-hand fragment, and Oxyine Chus Papyri, 421, right-hand fragment. For the Restoration C-class. Quart 7. 217-8. 1705, return, as the price to be given to her father for her. So in Iliad 18,593 maidens are called earners of oxen. Possibly Glaucus, like Aras, Fr 68, LL 55 FF. Raided the cattle of others. 1706, return, i.e. Glaucus should father the children of others. The curse of Aphrodite on the daughters of Tyndareus, Fr 67, may be compared. 1707, return, Porphyry, scholar, mathematician, philosopher and historian, lived 233 to 305 AD. He was a pupil of the Neoplatonist Plotinus. 1708, return, author of a geographical lexicon, produced after 400 AD, and abridged under Justinian. 1709, return, Archbishop of Thessalonica 1175 to 1192 AD, author of commentaries on Pindar and on the Iliad and Odyssey. 1710, return, in the earliest times a loincloth was worn by athletes, but was discarded after the 14th Olympiad. 1711, return, slight remains of 5 lines precede line 1 in the original, after line 20 an unknown number of lines have been lost, and traces of a verse preceding line 21 are here omitted. Between lines 29 and 30 are fragments of 6 verses which do not suggest any definite restoration. Note, line enumeration is that according to Evelyn White, a slightly different line numbering system is adopted in the original publication of this fragment. DBK 1712, return, the end of Schoenu's speech, the preparations and the beginning of the race are lost. 1713, return, of the 3 which Aphrodite gave him to enable him to overcome Atalanta. 1714, return, the geographer, fluid c. 24 BC. 1715, return, of Miletus, flourished about 520 BC. His work, a mixture of history and geography, was used by Herodotus. 1716, return, the Hesiodic story of the daughters of Proetus can be reconstructed from these sources. They were sought in marriage by all the Greeks, poor Hellenes, but having offended Dionysius, or, according to Servius, Juno, were afflicted with a disease which destroyed their beauty, or were turned into cows. They were finally healed by Melampus. 1717 Return, Fluid 56 to 88 AD. He is best known for his work on Virgil. 1718 Return. This and the following segment are meant to be read together. DBK. 1719 Return. This fragment as well as fragments #40, #101, and #102 were added by Mr. Evelyn White in an appendix to the second edition, 1919. They are here moved to the catalogues proper for easier use by the reader. DBK. 1720 Return, for the restoration of LL 1 to 16 C. Ox. Pap pt 11. pp. 46 to 7, the supplements of LL 17 to 31 are by the translator, CP. Class. Quartex, 1916, pp. 65 to 67. 1721 Return. The crocus was to attract Europa, as in the very similar story of Persephone, cp. Homeric Hymns 2. Lines 8 ff. 1722 Return. Apollodorus of Athens, Fluid 144 BC, was a pupil of Aristochus. He wrote a handbook of mythology, from which the extant work bearing his name is derived. 1723 Return. Priest at Praeneste. He lived c. 170 to 230 AD. 1724 Return. Son of Apollonius Discolus, lived in Rome under Marcus Aurelius. His chief work was on accentuation. 1725 Return. This and the next two segments are meant to be read together. DBK. 1726 Return. Sacred to Poseidon. For the custom observed there, cp. Homeric Hymns 3. 231 ff. 1727 Return. The allusion is obscure. 1728 Return. Apollonius the Crabbed was a grammarian of Alexandria under Hadrian. He wrote largely on grammar and syntax. 1729 Return. 275 to 195 BC, mathematician, astronomer, scholar, and head of the Library of Alexandria. 1730 Return, of Cum. He wrote a universal history covering the period between the Dorian migration and 340 BC. 1731 Return, i.e. the nomad Scythians, who are described by Herodotus as feeding on mare's milk and living in caravans. 1732 Return. The restorations are mainly those adopted or suggested in Ox. Pap pt 11. pp. 48 ff, for those of LL. 8 to 14 C class. Quartex, 1916, pp. 67-69. 1733, return, i.e. those who seek to outwit the oracle, or to ask of it more than they ought, will be deceived by it and be led to ruin. Cp. Hymn to Hermes, 541 ff. 1734, return, Zetes and Calais, sons of Boreas, who were amongst the Argonauts, delivered fine news from the Harpies. The Straphades, islands of turning, are here supposed to have been so called because the sons of Boreas were there turned back by Iris from pursuing the Harpies. 1735, return, an Epicurean philosopher, fluid 50 BC. 1736, return, charming with her voice, or charming the mind, song, and lovely sounding. 1737, return, Diodorus Siculus, fluid 8 BC, author of an universal history ending with Caesar's Gallic Wars. 1738, return, the first epic in the Trojan cycle. Like all ancient epics, it was ascribed to Homer, but also, with more probability, to Stasinus of Cyprus. 1739, return, this fragment is placed by Spon after Works and Days L120. 1740, return, a Greek of Asia Minor, author of the description of Greece, on which he was still engaged in 173 AD. 1741, return, Wilemoitz thinks one or other of these citations belongs to the catalogue. 1742, return, lines 1 to 51 are from Berlin Papyri, 9739, lines 52 to 106 with B1 to 50, and following fragments, are from Berlin Papyri, 10,560. A reference by Pausanias, 3. 2410, to LL. 100 ff. Proves that the two fragments together come from the Catalogue of Women. The second book, the beginning of which is indicated after L106, can hardly be the second book of the catalogues proper. Possibly it should be assigned to the EOIAI, which were sometimes treated as part of the catalogues, and sometimes separated from it. The remains of 37 lines following B50 in the papyrus are too slight to admit of restoration. 1743, return, SC the suitor whose name is lost. 1744, return, wooing was by proxy, so Agamemnon wooed Helen for his brother Menelaus, LL 14-15, and Idomeneus, who came in person and sent no deputy, is specially mentioned as an exception, and the reasons for this, if the restoration printed in the text be right, is stated, LL 69 ff. 1745, return. The papyrus here marks the beginning of a second book, possibly of the EOIAE. The passage, LL 2-50, probably led up to an account of the Trojan and Theban war, in which, according to Works and Days LL 161-166, the race of heroes perished. The opening of the Cypria is somewhat similar. Somewhere in the fragmentary lines 13-19 a son of Zeus, almost certainly Apollo, was introduced, though for what purpose is not clear. With L31 the destruction of man, CPLL 4-5, by storms which spoil his crops begins. The remaining verses are parenthetical, describing the snake which bears its young in the spring season. 1746, return, i.e. the snake, as in Works and Days L 524, the boneless one is the cuttlefish. 1747, return, c. 1110-1180 AD. His chief work was a poem, Chiliads, in accentual verse of nearly 13,000 lines. 1748, return. According to this account Iphigenia was carried by Artemis to the Tauri Chersonis, the Crimea. The Tauri, Herodotus 403, identified their maiden goddess with Iphigenia, but Euripides, Iphigenia in Tauris, makes her merely priestess of the goddess. 1749, return, of Alexandria. He lived in the 5th century, and compiled a Greek lexicon. 1750, return, for his murder Minos exacted a yearly tribute of boys and girls, to be devoured by the Minotaur, from the Athenians. 1751, return, of Naucratis. His Dipnosophista, Dons at Dinner, is an encyclopedia of miscellaneous topics in the form of a dialogue. His date is c. 230 AD. 1752, return. There is a fancied connection between Las, stone, and Laos, people. The reference is to the stones which Deucalion and Pyrrha transformed into men and women after the flood. 1753, return. Eustathius identifies Ilus with Orlus, father of Oras. Here again is fanciful etymology, Ilus being similar to Ilios, complaisant, gracious. 1754, return, imitated by Virgil, Aeneid 7-808, describing Camilla. 1755, return, c. 600 AD, a lecturer and grammarian of Constantinople. 1756, return, priest of Apollo, and, according to Homer, discoverer of wine. Maroneia in Thrace is said to have been called after him. 1757, return. The crow was originally white, but was turned black by Apollo in his anger at the news brought by the bird. 1758, return. A philosopher of Athens under Hadrian and Antonius. He became a Christian and wrote a defense of the Christians addressed to Antoninus Pius. 1759, Return, Zeus slew Asclepius, Fr 90, because of his success as a healer, and Apollo in revenge killed the Cyclopes, Fr 64. In punishment Apollo was forced to serve Admetus as herdsman. Cp. Euripides, Alcestis, 1-8, 1760, return, for Siren and Aristoelis, cp. Virgil, Georgics, 4. 315 ff. 1761, return, a writer on mythology of uncertain date. 1762, return, in Epirus. The oracle was first consulted by Deucalion and Pyrrha after the flood. Later writers say that the god responded in the rustling of leaves in the oaks for which the place was famous. 1763, return, the fragment is part of a leaf from a papyrus book of the 4th century AD. 1764, return, according to Homer and later writers Meleager wasted away when his mother Althea burned the brand on which his life depended, because he had slain her brothers in the dispute for the hide of the Caledonian boar. Cp. Bacchylides, Ode v 136 ff. 1765, return, the fragment probably belongs to the catalogues proper rather than to the EOIAE, but, as its position is uncertain, it may conveniently be associated with Frags 99 and the Shield of Heracles. 1766, return, most of the smaller restorations appear in the original publication, but the larger are new. These last are highly conjectural, there being no definite clue to the general sense. 1767, return, Alcmaeon, who took part in the second of the two heroic Theban expeditions, is perhaps mentioned only incidentally as the son of Amphiaraus, who seems to be clearly indicated in LL 7-8, and whose story occupies LL 5-10. At L11 the subject changes and Electrion is introduced as father of Alcmena. 1768, return, the association of LL 1-16 with LL 17-24 is presumed from the apparent mention of Erichthonius in L 19. A new section must then begin at L 21. See Ox. Pap pt 11. p 55, and for restoration of LL 5-16, ib p 53. LL 19-20 are restored by the translator. 1801, return, a mountain peak near Thebes which took its name from the Sphinx, called in Theogony L 326 fix. 1802, return, cyanus was a glass paste of deep blue color. The zones were concentric bands in which were the scenes described by the poet. The figure of fear, L44, occupied the center of the shield, and Oceanus, L314, enclosed the whole. 1803, return, she who drives herds, i.e. the victorious, since herds were the chief spoil gained by the victor in ancient warfare. 1804, return, the cap of darkness which made its wearer invisible. 1805, return, The existing text of the vineyard scene is a compound of two different versions, clumsily adapted, and eked out with some makeshift additions. 1806, return. The conception is similar to that of the sculptured group at Athens of two lions devouring a bull. Dickens, Cat of the Acropolis Museum, No. 3. 1901, return. A Greek sophist who taught rhetoric at Rome in the time of Hadrian. He is the author of a collection of proverbs in 3 books. 2001, return. When Heracles prayed that a son might be born to Telamon and Erebia, Zeus sent forth an eagle in token that the prayer would be granted. Heracles then bade the parents call their son Ares after the eagle, Aetos. 2002, return. Enomos, king of Pisa in Elis, warned by an oracle that he should be killed by his son-in-law, offered his daughter Hippodamia to the man who could defeat him in a chariot race, on condition that the defeated suitors should be slain by him. Ultimately Pelops, through the treachery of the charioteer of Enomos, became victorious. 2003, return. SC to Scythia. 2004, return. In the Homeric hymn to Hermes, Battus almost disappears from the story, and a somewhat different account of the stealing of the cattle is given. 2101, return. SC. Colophon. Proclus in his abstract of the returns, SC of the heroes from Troy, says Calchas and his party were present at the death of Tiresias at Colophon, perhaps indicating another version of this story. 2102, return. LL 1-2 are quoted by Athenaeus, 2p40, LL 3-4 by Clement of Alexandria, Stromati 6. 226. Buttman saw that the two fragments should be joined. Note: these two fragments be read together.